So it's February 2020, and I am back with another Q&A installment. Yeah, I thought it was time for that after the Valentine's Day episode, When I Love You. That was beautiful and poetic and pre-written and deep, and it actually went viral in the Philippines, so I had hundreds of messages from lovelorn middle-aged Filipino women and a few men, which was very flattering. But let's get to the Q&A at hand. This is a question that came into the show, to Buddha and the Slut, to me personally, from a friend on Instagram, slid into my DMs, and Jalala said to me, asked, what or who were the worst / most respectful travelers that you've encountered since you've been traveling for about 20 years? This is what you said in your podcast. You must have some stories. I know you've had many good stories, but do you want to go there? Do you want to go to the dark side of the travelers that you've met? Now, let's start with the generalizations. And I'm an old guy, so if you remember back in the 80s and early 90s too, there was a term, and I apologize to my Yankee pals, but there was a term about travelers back then from America. They were called ugly Americans. They were usually middle class or lower, but they had some money in the 80s with the boom times, with the yuppie years, the stock market and everything booming. And they started to travel because air travel was just becoming affordable at that time to all. And they would go places, and we'd all hear the stories of like, where's the McDonald's? Where's the 7-Eleven? Where's the Michelob? And the rudeness inherent in expecting your culture to be transplanted from your home to another culture. It would boggle my mind, but this is coming from a Canadian who lived hours from the American border, but down in the warm zone of southern Ontario, Canada. And I'd be working at a gas station in the summertime, and American travelers would come in with their hatchback, their station wagon, their van, and skis on top, and ask, "So it's June. We're just wondering where the nearest ski hill is," and you just had to shake your head. So that wasn't quite, why can't I get my cheeseburger here? Or why can't I get my pork cutlet in, Muslim country? Or, again, a cow product in India. But, okay, so that was the first group of, strange travelers. The next phase seemed to come with the 90s and the early aughts. And those are our British friends. Now, again, I'm part of the Commonwealth. We are raised in Canada to worship our British overlords. But, man, low-class Brits with money and cheap airfare through Europe, that's just a tragedy waiting to happen. I think we have all encountered some drunken louts or chavs or whatever the heck you want, scousers. I don't know what you call them these days. I don't know what the hip term is, but man, Brits out of control with money. I can tell you tons of stories in Prague with the bachelor parties that would come through that city and the amount of, vomit that would gather on a corner and the poor women who were accosted. Let me just say, when people say, do you feel unsafe in Asia? Do you feel unsafe in being a stranger in a strange land? I have never felt more unsafe than I did in a main thoroughfare in London City at 10 p.m. at night, walking with my cousin Tobias Tinker, looking for a cool place to eat some Indian in a supposedly upscale and safe neighborhood, and seeing a crowd of drunken British 20-somethings coming towards us looking for trouble. And yeah, here in Asia, I've experienced the same. We'll get to that in a minute. And then this third phase now, third phase of new money, it's Chinese and Russians traveling around Eastern Hemisphere and also into the West and into Europe. Now, again, this is a case of transplanting culture, right? You've got the Chinese thing, and their culture is all about status, and whoever has the most money in history just inherently is going to have the position of most status. And they come somewhere else and go, well, we have higher status, and they're going to act how they're going to act. They're going to spit in your streets. They're going to talk loudly. They're going to push their way to the front of a line because that's what they do in their culture. They're tops in the region. Now, then you got the Russian thing. Russians are intimidating as fuck. I have said this before in the podcast, and it is true. My 7 years in Thailand has taught me a hell of a lot about the Russian thing. And it was an eye-opener for me because First off, you've got a culture that doesn't deal well with strangers. It's not just that they're xenophobic. It's that strangers, historically, traditionally, have meant trouble for Russians. It meant they were being invaded. It meant, a way of life like capitalism coming to destroy their way of life, communism, and causing all of the fallout from that. The other was always bad. So they'll come to a place with their mask up, with their shields high, with their protection on. Now, augment that, add to that, subsequently, the fact that Russians culturally, especially Russian men, they don't smile at strangers. Smiling between men that don't know each other is considered a sign of weakness or fear. Right? You don't smile until you've proven yourself and become friends. I tell this story to everybody. I was in a Muay Thai gym and I was, training with a whole load of Russian guys, tough, tattooed dudes in their 30s, supposedly belonging to the Red Devils Motorcycle Club, the Hells Angels equivalent in Moscow. And these were scary dudes. These were badasses who would look at you and basically give you the look of, I stab you in the face if you look at me any longer. It was terrifying. But then, a month later, after they've seen you eat at all the same places and, pass out in the gym from heat and suffer all the same ways that they did, all of a sudden these same dudes walking towards you on the beach in the afternoon between workout sessions, they seem tough and you start to tense up and you're like, I'm by myself and they're all together and this is it. They're going to roll me for my money and bury me in the sea in pieces. Instead, the guy in the middle, Vlad, comes up and is like, hey, my friend, I saw you this morning. Very good boxing. You come to my house tonight to meet my wife and also my friend who's #1 prostitute. I tell you the story before and it's true. It's just that when they're coming to a foreign culture they don't know that well, the walls are up, money talks, and they seem incredibly rude and oblivious to the cultural needs of where they are. There's no when in Rome with people. And so, I guess the moral of the story is, before we get into worst and most disrespectful travelers, is that if your media over time, over generations even, and your money, your sudden wealth, conspire all the time to say that you're the best in the world or you're the chosen ones, you're better than everyone else and the world should bow to you, if that's the propaganda being pumped at you, then you're going to be a backpacking douchebag. And this is probably why I avoid places like Phi Phi Island like the plague while I'm living here in southern Thailand. And no, that's not because of coronavirus or worries about ping pong shows and shit. No, it's that young travelers, I'm going to totally focus and call you out, young Israelis, you're the fucking worst because you've had generations of propaganda tell you that you're better than other people and suddenly you have money and suddenly you're traveling around the world and you're treating people like shit. And I'm not afraid to say that. Call me out on it because I've had the experience and many others have had it too. But again, not just Israelis, not just snobby French, not just, knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing shit with the door open Australians, not with the drunken Brits, not just with the street-spitting Chinese who treat you like you're nothing, not just like the menacing mafia Russians, even idiot Canucks, idiots from my own country. They come to northern Thailand and they land. They're just like, whoa, totally time for like hockey and beer. Let's take some mushrooms and go down the river. And they're naked everywhere and disrespectful. And it's embarrassing. It's shameful. And I find that with a lot of older travelers too, from everywhere, from all these countries, from, France, England, Israel, Russia, Britain, you name it, America even. They'll pull me aside when they see that embarrassing behavior from their brethren, from their compatriots, and apologize in hushed tones like, I'm so sorry, I'm so embarrassed right now. And I've done it too when I've met Canadians who are assholes, because assholes come in all shapes and sizes. No one culture dominates that realm of thinking. But you asked me, what were the worst things I've seen on the road from travelers, from people displaced from their own nation, not doing the when in Rome thing? Well, the first one that comes to mind were a group of Chinese travelers, tourists in Nepal. This was about 4 years ago when I went up to Pokhara to climb in the Annapurna range. And I'm climbing with this group, doing the hike up the mountains one day, and we had a group of Chinese travelers with us, tourists, and they didn't leave their large suitcases back at their hotel because they didn't trust them there. So instead, they brought them along. And these tiny Nepalese Sherpas have 5 or 6 suitcases stacked high on their backs, hobbling up the hills, not complaining, not asking for more money, not saying no, just doing it, trying to grin and bear the insanity of it all as the Chinese girls and guys are like taking selfies of like, ha ha ha, look at that guy carrying my stuff. And that set my anger alight. And then the full flame burned later, a few days later, down off the mountain. I'm in the tourist town of Pokhara, and I found this rock and roll blues bar. And I went inside and I sat at the bar and I ordered a drink. And there was a sunken table down beside the bar, and it was about maybe like 8 Chinese 20-somethings, equal split, boys and girls. And this really, really cool kind of like Nepalese Johnny Depp was behind the bar, very much a Captain Jack Sparrow sort of dude, handsome, didn't say much, kind of funny, eyebrows raised and stuff. And we didn't speak much, but there was a mutual respect there, and I make sure to keep tipping him for drinks. And this Chinese guy, the cool alpha of the group, gets up, his sunglasses on at 9 o'clock at night, and he gets up and he shoves the bucket across the bar, the ice bucket across the bar, and he's like, ice, now, ice. And he spits beside the ground, beside his feet, as he pushes the bucket towards the guy and just points at it. Ice, now. And you could see him turn back to his friends and say something, and they all laughed and rolled their eyes and went back to their phones. And poor Johnny Depp dude, he just sighs and digs in with the bucket and fills it and goes to put it back on the counter. And I just went, And I looked at him and I took the bucket and I took it from him and I nodded. And he looked at me like, "Ooh, what are you going to do?" And I just went, and held up a finger. And I walked over to the table. And I went, "Oh, hello, ni hao ma," or whatever I said in Chinese, but I don't know Chinese. And I nodded the bartender, and I look around the table, and then I take the ice, and I flip it over, and I dump it on the table. I smash it down, and I say, "You show respect. Apologize or leave." And they all cringed back, and they were scared, and they looked up at the bar and go, "Oh, we sorry. We very sorry." And I'm like, "That's better. Enjoy your night." And went back to the bar, and the barman gave me like a warm smile and a nod, and I didn't pay for my drinks that night, but left him a sizable tip. So, number 2, I think there's some talking in the background here. I don't have a totally confined space, but hey, we're just rolling with a Q&A, so it's okay. You probably heard the call to prayer earlier. This is just the way things go when you're in the wild, and that's where I am now, still in southern Thailand. So number 2, speaking of in southern Thailand, on my island of Koh Yao in the south, this little Muslim island, last season, the first time this ever happened, some older British men came to our island. Now, before, people who came here maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I first came here, they were just looking for like an eco holiday, for adventure, for kind of turning time back, stepping back in time 30 years to when Thailand was like really quiet and undeveloped. That's changed a bit. And now there are more boats coming over here from the mainland, from Phuket and from Krabi, and different types of tourists on shorter tours, 3 days here, 3 days here, 3 days there, 3 days there. Kind of with the mindset that all of Thailand is the same. It's all Patong and Pattaya and Bangkok, and it's all girls and partying and nudity and whatever, which still isn't part of the culture, but somehow this has become sexual Disneyland, right? I've said that before. So to get back to the story, there is a therapeutic massage place, a beautiful little massage house that's right by the Muay Thai gym on our island. It's a spa. And a totally respectable one at that. I know the lady who owns it, and she's very sweet. And I went in one afternoon for a massage because my lower back was thrown out for some shitty kicks I did in the heavy bag at the gym. And the lady owner was just totally distraught. She's like, "Oh, Brooke, oh, so bad today, so bad." And I'm like, what's wrong? What happened? And she said that this group of like 5 British guys, older, like 50s or 60s, they were like in shape, but they obviously were doing the whole testosterone, HGH, coming for a party, gonna be badass, one more kick at the can sort of lifestyle. They had arrived at the spa with 2 girls, scantily clad, younger women, clearly from Phuket or somewhere else. And they sent the Thai women in to ask the owner, we want 2 more girls, maybe 3. They have to be with all of us. How much you charge? And the owner didn't understand what they were asking. And then finally said, "We need girls. We need whores. We need men to fuck us all. What are you going to do? How much? Are you going to be stupid or what?" And she was just in shock, still shaken by this hours later, that these horrible men would bring these women to this, peaceful place where stuff like this does not occur, at least not out in the open, and definitely not for tourists, and step in front of clients and demand, "Where are your whores? We want to pay for some to join us for a weekend of debauchery." And the Brits started yelling at her and calling her dumb C word and stupid this and, whore that and whatever. And then they left with their girls. And thankfully, I did not see them on the island, because if I did see them on the island, I would point them towards a restaurant and say, "Go down there, get some glass noodles. I'll make sure to call ahead and they have broken glass in the noodles for you. Eat it, swallow it, die." That's how I'd feel about that. And to end our happy trilogy of tales of foreigners traveling in strange lands, I have to make it personal. And I have to say that the one that stands out for me the most was from my own youth. It's a first-hand tale. This was my first ever real trip, a spring break road trip with two guys from high school to Fort Myers, Florida. Yes, here when it comes to one culture invading another and not behaving properly, it's strangely enough a Canadian doing it in America. So Fort Myers, Florida, 17-hour drive down, spending 2 weeks down there, a week and a half approximately, down on the beaches of Fort Myers during spring break. Now, I just had a fight with this one 7-year frenemy of mine who had convinced me to go on the trip, I think because he thought I had money and I would help him pay for shit, and I didn't. And he kind of resented me as the days went by. So I'm sitting silent in the passenger seat beside this guy driving in his little black truck, and it's nighttime, and we're going down the highway. And earlier in the day, and I said something, I called him out on his behavior. He had actually hawked up and spat in my face, and he laughed about it. He laughed like, "What are you going to do?" And he was all like, he was a short kid, but he was jacked up and he was known to be violent. And I was kind of scared about getting back home. I didn't want to be stranded down in Florida, the crazy state. And we're driving down the highway in silence, and he's cranking the tune. I think it was Pink Floyd or something. And he's throwing beer cans out the window on crowded highways. Earlier in the trip, he had been wolf whistling at middle school girls, at the beach and in front of their schools. It was sad, but the worst thing, the thing I will never forget, the worst thing was me telling him, he said, "You should slow down on the highway," because we were going through a panhandle area and there were all these signs warning drivers of endangered animals and potential road strikes, not just, killing the animals, but also hurting you. And I spotted two gleaming eyes right on the yellow line, in the near distance. And I grabbed his arm and I screamed at him to swerve. And he did. Straight towards it. There was this sickening thud, this thump and this crunch. And I saw some shadow roll and go limp behind the truck in the brake lights. And it turns out he had just ran over a Florida panther, a mountain lion, a cougar, one of my favorite animals on earth. And he actually cheered as he did it. He went, "Yes!" And he pulled his right hand down and then shifted the gears. And yeah, that was the most offensive travel moment of my life. And I am still deeply ashamed that someone from my culture in another land would do this, and that I wasn't brave enough to stop it. But 30 years later, as an epilogue, rest assured, little man, and I mean that how it sounds, because to this day you still have the smallest dick I have ever seen, Crayon Boy. Karma waits with bated breath for shitty travelers. I have seen the wheels turn and crush people like you in this part of the world. It comes eventually for all horrible people, even more so. So until next time, my friends, when you're going somewhere new, show some respect and some consideration. Do a bit of research. Don't be ignorant. And show some empathy. How would you feel if someone came to your house and did some of these things? Yeah, I thought so. Later.